Right. It's 7:00. I'm going to call the Middlebury Selectboard meeting of January 9th to order. And the first item is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
And seconded, I'm going to just reorder a few things. Number 9 is, number 10 is going to be what is now number 11, and number 11 and 10 are changing, basically.
Right.
So, is there anything else anybody would like to make comments on about the agenda changes?
No.
What's that?
Did you, I'm not sure, did you say we're not doing 10?
Right.
Okay.
Oh, postponed.
He said
Yes.
switch them. That's-
Yeah.
10 is postponed and 9 and 11 are switched.
So is 11, the ones we're swapping is 9 and 11.
Library and Middlebury Regional EMS.
So the library is coming before, so library is 9. And MREMS is 10.
Essentially 10.
We're waiting on
And we're
the
postponing
property
that.
transfer.
There we go. Yeah. Okay, I
Yes.
think we got that straight. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next is approval of the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anything anybody would like to comment on or anything else about the consent agenda?
Congratulations again to Bob Wells. That's pretty impressive. And big thanks to the police department and the wastewater guys, right? Or I should say the wastewater employees for the
Public
toy.
Works.
Public Works.
Oh, Public Works, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the toy drives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is Bob going down for the presentation?
I don't have a confirmation, but I hope so.
Right.
He has that nice new car, electric car. It may take him a couple
And
of stops.
He has funds for training and stuff like that, right? Yeah. It's a conference, right?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Oh yeah, I hope he
Yeah,
goes.
Hope he goes.
I hope we get pictures too.
So definitely some noteworthy things being done by our town staff. And if anybody's out there watching it, I encourage you to go to the packet and read about it. Hearing nothing else, all in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next is citizen comments. Is anyone here for something that's not on the agenda? Is there any hands up out there? I don't see it. So, okay. Go on to candidates for appointment to the Means Woods Board of Trustees. Get your name down here, Kathleen. Did you, as presenter?
Okay, we do have candidates. Stephen Ralph is on, if you'd like to meet him, he is on the line, so I could give him permission to talk. Stephen, would you like to go ahead as a candidate for the?
I guess I just want to give back to the community. I have an associate degree in forestry, as per I said in my statement. I've done work with the Appalachian Trail in the Tidewater area of Virginia, which we also had a section up on the Appalachian Trail in a little bit west of Charlottesville. So I've done that type of work. I also was a licensed land surveyor in the state of Colorado, and I did mapping for the federal government and combat support.
Pretty cool. Are there any of the other candidates?
Are you?
I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amanda Werner.
Yeah,
I'm at a point in my life where I'm able to give back to the community, so I was looking for something that I thought would be applicable to my skills. For those of you who don't know me, I have a lot of tree experience. I grew up on the Werner Tree Farm. I have a lot of practical knowledge about tree health, invasive species, soil management. I have less experience with being on a board, but it's something that I'd like to gain experience in.
Thank you.
But
I kind of had a question for each of these candidates about like what they see as projects or the future for recreation in the Means Woods. If you want to speak first, that'd be great.
I'm happy to go first,
Yeah.
So I have hiked in that section of the trail a lot, just because it happens to be close to where I live. And it was very, very valuable to me, especially during COVID, having open public land that I could go out and explore on. And that's something that I'd like to see continued. I think it's really neat how Malt does programs out on the trail. I think things like that should be encouraged. I love seeing when the daycare center has all the kids' little activities spread throughout that section. I think things like that should be encouraged. Anything that's going to engage the public with the woods, and it brings value to people and it encourages people to have a conservation mentality. So I think the more public engagement we can get with that section of woods, the better it'll be for the woods and for the community.
Thanks. Can Steven speak? Is he still here?
Yes.
Hey, thanks.
I've walked the TAM a couple of times, and it wasn't until I got onto the Middlebury site that I found out that I read the deed and a couple other documents. And there is, I guess, about 4 or 5 other trails back there, which I don't know where they're at. But what I did see on the TAM is that there's a lot of roots showing. And I've seen this in Newport News Park, where they use fluorescent paint to not paint every root, but paint the ones that stick up the most for somebody to trip on. I also noticed he had some deadfalls hanging up in the trees that probably should come down if people start wandering back there. I did notice that in one of the documents it said a possible revenue source would be cutting firewood back there. Has that ever been done? Does anybody know if that's ever been done?
It's right, it could be on the border, cutting the firewood, it could be the border owner. They have sugar woods right beside there. I'm not sure, I'd have to see where you're.
Well, it was actually in the deed saying that that was a possible source of revenue.
Oh, source of revenue. I'm sorry, I missed the.
Was to cut trees for firewood. And I was just curious if that had ever been done. Because it doesn't look like that forest had been thinned, as far as I could see off the TAM,
Yeah.
in quite a long time.
And not in my history, 50 years or whatever around there, I've never seen that. We used to do,
Well,
that's one of the things, I'm on the committee, so I'm not going to vote on the candidate for this because I'm a member of the committee, but the funding that is an issue for maintenance of that. I guess I don't think we've ever discussed the possibility of raising funds for the maintenance of that, so.
Well, I believe that the track gets $300 a year to maintain, from the city, to maintain the woods. Now, whether we could possibly get, some people in there to selectively cut for firewood, that might add additional revenue. The other thing is that I live fairly close to Meadsville too, and actually I live right across from the development that's going on, the Stonegate Meadows development, and they had talked about having some way to access the TAM, which would be, I guess, something coming up in the future that would have to be looked at.
Sure.
And probably the best way would be underneath the power line.
Right.
To avoid, creating a new trail for the woods.
Great. I appreciate both those answers. I think they were
Who are the other?
excellent.
Who's the educator? And I guess we're looking for a spirited citizen here to do this. But
We have Cindy Hill, who is the conservationist,
Okay.
and we have John Murphy, who is the educator.
Okay.
John Murphy.
So we can only appoint one.
Correct. So my proposal to you is to nominate all of these people tonight and then appoint them at the next one
So we would typically do these.
for the competitive positions, yeah.
Okay.
What, if you are considering cutting in there, you ought to look at logs first before firewood.
That's not
Yeah,
a consideration we've talked about at this point.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, there's board members who have a real issue, or there's committee members that I don't want to spend all night talking about it.
Okay.
So,
So our candidates are Robert Wieland, Amanda Werner, Leon Smith, John Bodish, and Stephen Ralph.
So I'll make a motion that we nominate all 5 interested candidates. Do I need to say anything else? Oh, is that good?
Second.
all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed?
Amanda, this is the way we normally do it. We usually always nominate and then we wait 2 weeks. And
I thought the email, but thank you.
Okay. Next is it-
Thank you for
That's-
being here.
that's Jen.
Same to Stephen. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
oh, there's Victoria. She hasn't missed one of these yet. I was looking around to see where she was. Okay. In accordance with 24 VSA, Section 127-1302, the board is conducting a public hearing to take questions and comments from the Middlebury community regarding the proposed FY25 general fund budget. In a moment, I will turn the floor over to our town manager, Kathleen Ramsey, who will lead off with an update on revisions to the draft budget that have been made since the board's last discussion. After her presentation, if you have a question or comment regarding the budget and would like to address the select board, please raise your hand if you're here in the audience, or raise the virtual hand. And once acknowledged, the address, if you're here, come forward to the mic, say who you are, and address the subject. If there are any questions, if not, let's turn this over to Kathleen.
So the first part of the presentation, the changes since the last draft, there haven't been any changes. Looking for some input on the budget as proposed and reviewed by the select board at the December 14th.
Yeah.
We can bring up the line item budget if you'd like. The budget is up about 5.3%, and the tax rate overall is up 5.1%, 4.3 cents reflected in the proposal. We can review any aspect of it that you'd like, or open it up to the floor for input.
So since this is the public hearing portion, I think we'll give any of the public opportunity to question. Is anybody here for the public review of our town budget? No? Victoria, would you, you're usually our most loyal and devout citizen in holding us accountable on our budget. I would, I guess, entertain having you come forward into the screen and
Okay.
hit us with your questions, if you
Order
could.
to panelists then.
Okay.
Hi, Fred. I see your hand, and we'll get to you after we chat with Victoria for a sec. Victoria? Yeah, okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
Now can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can.
I can.
Okay. The wind is blowing. I don't have great internet, so I apologize if I freeze up on you. Thank you. Glad to be back again. Kathleen kindly met with me this afternoon and explained about the surplus and using the option tax and so I'm mostly just having some line item questions at this point. It seemed, the whole thing seems, pretty straightforward, wages and benefits and capital improvements. And one capital improvement I'm wondering about is the $70,000 for gravel roads. And in the capital improvement budget, it said paving and gravel. And could you give a little more detail on what's happening? Because I know Halpin Road took a real hit this summer. And repair has been difficult, so
So
do you have any
I'm
on that?
Emily is going to be joining us. Emily Sherrington, our Director of Public Works Planning. So she can respond to that question.
Hi, Victoria. Were you talking in the capital budget or in the general fund?
Well, it's in both places. I know in the capital budget, there was a line for paving and a line for, like, it's maintenance or something.
Okay, I was confused at the dollar amount you referenced. So we, for gravel road,
Yeah, sorry.
so we had gravel road improvements and a line item for gravel road paving. Both of those were in the capital budget, and we removed those. This year, we decided not to fund the gravel road paving as a savings to offset some of the other increases that we're seeing. And then we're moving the budgeted amount from gravel road improvements in the capital budget over to the general fund.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, so no, there's no imminent plan to pay.
Not in this cycle, no.
Okay. On line, let's see, line 165, this, it mentions a planning study. I was wondering what that was for.
We don't have anything particular in mind, but from time to time, there are pedestrian plans, downtown plans that come up, and it'd be good to have funding available to match, most likely to match grants for planning studies. That is another item that was in the capital budget, but we thought it would be more appropriate to include that in the operating budget since it can't be capitalized.
Okay. And there's on 427, there's a service contract mentioned for the police department. And I was wondering what that was for.
Okay, let me promote Jason to the meeting. Let's see. Hi, Jason.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm trying to find 427. My chart does not have the line service contract control.
It's under patrol, yeah.
Yeah. That would be in the increase of $25,095. Okay, so part of that is, increase in the Madison County Sheriff's Department to do transports of prisoners for us so that we can keep our officers in town instead of sending them to Rutland for transports. We have no facilities in Madison County, but the largest chunk of that is a finance charge to replace our in-car video camera systems. And it's a total of over 5 years between $68,000 to $72,000, depending on what day we communicate with the company. And there's the first year of that would cost us $22,800. Hence that large increase.
Oh, okay. All right, so the part of that for the sheriff, that's also, it's under the revenue. On line 60, it talked about dispatch, so that's what that's, those two.
No, two different things. The dispatch contract, they pay us $2,000 a month to provide dispatch services for them, and completely independently, we have a contract with them to do transports for us.
Oh, all right, so money in, money out, okay.
That's right.
You forgive me. Okay, thank you. And that was, and then one more, on 104, there's a case in lieu of taxes with a $40,000 increase. I was wondering.
So that's the college gift to the town, which is in two parts. One based on investments and the other based on the tax rate. So given that investments have performed well, that was where that was coming from.
Oh, I didn't know they did more. Okay. Okay. The question, the new contract with the NEM at the the ambulance service.
Correct.
Can you have a little more? Is that a contract that will be ongoing? Is this what we'll be doing in the future? And then what happens if not all the towns agree to it? Or could you explain a little more about that?
So this is the unfiltered request of the ambulance service for a budgeted amount this year by contract. The select board is meeting with the ambulance service later in this meeting to talk more about that request. So that is what we know in its correspondence with us, which is in the packet. The Middlebury Regional EMS said that it needed this increase and also further increases in future years in order to be sustainable.
Oh, so this proposal is just for this coming year, and it'll be different on. It's just, I remember it was such a big jump when they went up to the $84,000 and it just, yeah. But I guess, I mean, there really aren't any other options, right?
We don't know yet.
Victoria, we're gonna discuss this here in pretty shortly. After 8 o'clock, I guess they're coming to talk to us. This is the first year they've ever done a contract, and they're doing a contract
I'm
with
sorry?
us. This is the first year they've ever done a contract with us or anybody, so it's all new to us right now. We're a little surprised at the increase. They have the justifications for it. It's a cost per resident, and it's jumped up to $13. So if you want to hang around till after 8 o'clock, you could hear what they have to say.
I will, thank you, okay. Well, that's it, I appreciate the effort to keep on this shorter and covering that extra impact with our excess funds from the option tax. And your efforts every year to minimize have been really great. Thank you. And a lot of it's out of our control.
Got Fred?
Fred?
No sailing for Fred this winter.
What's that?
No sailing for Fred this winter.
No
Not,
sailing in the way?
he's not heading down to Bermuda.
Sail here.
Water's
The
still
lake
open.
will be great.
Hey, Fred?
Hi, hi all. Can you hear
Fred?
me?
Yes.
Kathleen, what is the general fund balance and the balance in other accounts like the equipment fund and capital improvement accounts? Is there anything other than press recruit fund that could be, put towards production of new property taxes we raised?
So this budget is proposing the use of surplus funds to stabilize the tax rate in the amount of $434,000. You can see that on line item. Sorry. Right at 121, we have a budgeted deficit that is included already. We are still awaiting the year-end FY23 audit, but last time the surplus was about 1.5 million.
So presumably you still have the percentage that you like to have as contingency and can address this.
Yes.
And what about any other funds, the equipment fund or the capital improvement accounts? Are there any surpluses in there?
So as you know, with inflation and other factors, the equipment fund has been hard hit and there isn't any money to tap for other things there. That we have assigned all of purchases for all of that.
And we're still trying to address some deferred equipment, schedule. We deferred a lot of equipment purchases and we're still trying to tackle those. So I would not want to take anything out of the equipment fund. We may already have to postpone some purchases just because of inflationary pressures and what we had planned to purchase and what actual prices are. We may need to bump some things already. So I would not be in favor of taking any money out of the equipment fund.
Okay, thanks. You're doing your usual good job of maintaining the stewardship of those funds. I just wanted to check in on that. Thank you very much.
It's a good question.
Thanks, Fred.
Good question.
So I just added this to your packet this afternoon while we're talking about the Cross Street Bridge Fund. And as a reminder, last year you elected to transfer to $228,496 from the Cross Street Bridge Fund under Article 3, and that was to recognize the increased debt service on the police storage building and to offset the increase in capital improvement planning funds. Part of the rationale for the capital improvement planning fund increase was that there was $163,000 included in the budget for library planning. And we thought that would be a one-time increase. So rather than increase the tax rate, we decided to use the Cross Street Bridge Fund for that. So just putting that on the table, the Cross Street Bridge Fund has $1.3 million in it currently, net all of the transfers we've made in recent years. So that's a potential source. And I laid out what the increase in the capital budget was this year and also what the debt service on the police storage building. As you may recall, for the police storage building, when we bonded for that, we bonded for the shortest possible term to save on interest, with the thought that we'd use the Cross Street Bridge Fund to pay that debt service.
What did you say the balance in the Cross Street Bridge Fund is?
3.1 million.
3.1?
Is that, oh, that's the total, but that doesn't subtract.
It's before we pull out for this, but
Before we pull out. This, the 228, 496 and the 290 that we use for the Maverick station and the $1 million for the storage tank has been deducted from that.
From that, it's going to be reduced.
Is,
Already removed.
3.1.
so what's left to come out of the 3.1 million? Just what's in this budget, which is
nothing yet.
nothing.
No, nothing from this, just the local option tax. So what we are planning to do for the local option tax,
1.3 or?
so this is Cross Street Bridge line items in number 8 in your packet. So our revenue side of the budget is 1.3 million in local option tax, $600,000 gift from the college for 1.9 in revenue, 1.9 million in revenue. The debt service totaling 859,300, leaving us, if the board elects, 1,040,700 to use to offset capital improvement expense.
So
Wow.
theoretically, if we don't take this million at the end of next year, we would have 4.1 in that fund.
What is a reasonable amount to put aside for the actual Cross Street Bridge? Do we have engineering estimates about what
We-
the maintenance?
VHB did do a long-term maintenance plan
Yeah,
for that.
8 years ago or so.
It was 8 years ago. So maybe we should get that refreshed.
yeah.
It wasn't,
I'd like to make sure we're covering the primary purpose that the voters elected to tax themselves for before we divert too much money out of that funding.
Well, with this,
so
we'll
just,
still have the 3.1.
Yes.
so this is local option tax, less debt service,
Yes.
which you have done. Last year you did 809,000, which was all of the estimated excess net, the debt service. However, we did have robust receipts in FY '24 and are anticipating a surplus in that. And the 1.3 million is also hopefully a conservative number estimating for last year.
And just for clarification, the difference between that 809, 308 and the 890, 692 is the expected versus the actual option tax receipts?
No, the
No.
890 is debt service.
Oh, right. I'm not reading properly. Okay, there's a number greater than the 809, which we are expecting to be added to this fund. Perfect.
Yeah.
Good. I can add, I'm sure. Maybe.
So we kind of got into the details. I didn't know if anybody had any more questions. Fred?
I'm fine, thanks.
hands up out there?
Anybody in our viewing audience want to chime in? Okay.
Quiet, windy night.
Well, if there are no further comments regarding the draft FY25 general fund budget, I'm going to call the public hearing closed at, what is it?
7:36.
7:36. Select Board will finalize our FY25 budget at our January 23rd meeting. And we certainly thank those of you who participated, reviewed, and hold us accountable. Victoria and Fred can always count on you two for sure. And I love it. Thank you. Our next item was kind of a continued review. We just went through that with Kathleen. Are there any questions on that, Kathleen? Anything else you want to show us in that review? I think it'd be worthwhile for us to look at an updated cost. I don't think that their estimates for what needs to be done is going to differ, but the cost might have exploded.
So one of the big items on the list was paving that the state did. So
We don't have to do that.
we don't have to do that.
We should look at that. We might find that we are comfortable pulling a little bit more out of there. How much, I think, leaving it, especially given some of the projects that we're talking about it. I think if we're going to try to have some sort of a level ramp, we don't want to pull too much.
Yeah, so one thing I'm cautious about is what's going to happen with all of the stormwater permitting.
Yeah.
And what those projects are going to cost. And I want to make sure I want to balance the property tax rate, but I also want to make sure we have some funding to go to make sure we have match funding to go after some additional grant money. You know, I'm hoping there's some money still available, but I feel like, you know, some of the ARPA federal money is starting to dry up a little bit, and we still have to do those projects, and they're going to be costly. So,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I
I'm not
totally agree.
opposed-
I don't think we want to try to take every dollar we have and not keep some for matches. I mean, some of the reason why we've been so successful is we had cash in pocket and plans.
Yep.
that were execution ready, and we could provide the match.
Yep.
So we could make a commitment to get the project done. And I think we have to retain that flexibility. So I'm with you on that. I just think we ought to look at it.
Yeah. Oh, sure. I don't disagree. I'm just, I don't know what the answer is. I just,
Yeah.
you know.
One of certainly that is one way to get, we certainly carry a lot of the responsibility of providing services for the greater Addison County community. That is one payback we get is
Yes.
that local option tax.
Yes.
Helps level the playing field
Absolutely.
a little bit.
Yes. It definitely helps us creates some revenue from us that comes from not just the Middlebury taxpayers.
Heidi Lacy from the Charter House is with us to talk a little about their budget request and
Hey.
ongoing efforts of the Charter House.
Hello, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, very well.
Hi, good evening, everyone. You may hear Jeffrey and or dog. I'm with mom and the dog this evening, so we'll try to keep it real.
I think it's Wheel of Fortune now, Heidi.
does make me real, doesn't it? So, first of all, thank you for this. Crystal actually notified me yesterday. So I was so happy that she sent me that reminder, and I'm pleased to speak with you all tonight. Sorry I did not be in person. I believe the purpose of my discussion with you is just to share what we're doing at Charter House. You probably recognize we have not asked for an increase in the 3 years that I've been there. I'm trying to do that very programmatically. I just feel that the state can assist with the finances more so than our local folks should be. So I am utilizing state funding in more efficient ways. But even though we haven't asked for an increase, we've certainly increased the services. We are still operating as an emergency shelter, a low barrier emergency shelter, which is, we are now one of 3 low barrier shelters in the state, which really just means that our eligibility requirements are less than what high barrier shelter may be. And we do allow things such as substance use, incarceration history, numerous barriers that would not allow someone into a high barrier shelter. We are open all day, every day. That is different. Prior to COVID, we were a warming shelter, and we decided very deliberately to allow those folks that are housed with us to stay on property all day long. And believe me, this is probably one of my biggest challenges, because just as you all are dealing with staffing shortages, so are we in human services, and that's no easy feat to keep folks with us all day, every day. I feel that the services that I would like to highlight the most for you all are just an increase in housing case management. Charter House has taken on a much larger role within that process. Last year, we were able to house 30 individuals, which was pretty amazing. Most were here in Addison County, so that felt very good. And we continue to work on the partnerships with John and Brianne and other housing navigators as well. But we're meeting with people once they are housed, so we're trying to offer them what's called housing retention. So we're not just an emergency shelter anymore. The partnerships in which we are really growing include Middlebury Police Department. We work, I feel, very closely and very well with Jason and his group. We work also very closely with the Turning Points of Addison County, as well as CSAC. We've brought both of those agencies into Charter House regularly for skill building, for coaching, for therapies. So those partnerships are vital to what we're doing, and we continue to grow them. We're working with town partners as well. We work regularly with Tri-Valley, as well as Ilsley Library staff, just regarding the unhoused. And those conversations seem to result in good solutions most of the time. And also we're doing quite a bit, as you know, in terms of the homelessness task force. We are helping the Middlebury Police Department and Kathleen to facilitate that group. We are also one of the only agencies right now that are actively going out every single week, although Turning Points and CSAC have been with us since October consistently. But we were doing that work even prior to October, and will continue to do so. From a more broad perspective, we are housing, we are with various housing committees throughout the state, and really working with Housing and Homeless Alliance of Vermont on this year's legislative session involving general assistance review and affordable housing. We chair the Addison County Housing Coalition group, and I do sit on the board of Housing and Homeless Alliance of Vermont. So we're trying to also advocate at a state level to help to continue to bring in more funding for Addison County as a whole. oftentimes Middlebury feels like we're hit the hardest. And you probably wonder, are you putting the bill for all of the other 22 or so towns? And I will say we are serving almost every town, and some only with 1 or 2 households, but it does feel like we are seeing that increase. And we are also asking them for funding as well. I'm happy to answer questions. Or not.
Any questions of Heidi?
No, I appreciate the update.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi.
Yeah, we appreciate your involvement and support for some of the critical issues in the town too. And no, it's not easy. We've been getting some information from state as they brainstorm how to handle and cope with the increasing homelessness and some of the other issues that we're facing. And so I know you've been one of our key point people in the task force, and I think that's critical to some of our successes we've seen. So thank you.
One other thing, Brian, I'd like to add. We are working with the Addison Independent to create a public education series. And I believe that John is going to start running that next week. But that's at least 5 to 6 articles that really do address housing and homelessness. We had decided as a task force that really public education was necessary to keep these conversations at the table. So that was one effort that we have kicked off, and I look forward to the public's response to those. So I'll certainly be available for all of you if that brings anything to your desk in terms of questions.
That sounds good. And as part of that education also as to what resources are out there and how to contact them?
Yes, we are trying to identify resources. We're also trying to address a little bit of what's going on out of county that we are being affected by, so that when we hopefully, as spring rolls around, we can be better prepared as a nonprofit agencies and town officials to answer the potential end of motels. So the series is, there's a wide variety of topics, but one will be resources, and others will be really identifying barriers and what solutions are available today versus 2 years down the road when that doesn't help us.
It's timely to get that in while the legislature's in session too.
Homelessness Awareness Day is the 18th of this month, so you'll see us all out on your morning commute. We'll be waiting again this year.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you all for your
Thanks, Heidi.
support. It means a lot to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi.
So now we have the library. If I'm reading my schedule, revised schedule right. 11 is 9.
May not be here till 8 o'clock.
Yeah, they're on a training.
Hey everyone.
Hey, Dana. Hey,
Greetings
Chris.
from Lincoln.
Is it windy up there?
It really is. It feels like the end of the world up here, but I'm hoping that it's all ambient
Wow.
noise. None of it's gonna come through on the computer mic, so hopefully you're not hearing
At the center.
Good evening, Chris Buston. It's not the end of the world in Waltham.
Nor Middlebury.
There I said it, yes.
All right, well, just to give everyone a little refresher on where we left off last time, Joe and I were here, I guess, 2 weeks ago or a month ago, and I presented an updated budget, total project budget of around $6.4 million. And I also presented that our funding sources had increased. So we are now optimistic that we'll be able to bring in $6.5 million in combined grants and private fundraising. At that meeting, the select board asked for the tentative timeline leading up to a possible May bond vote, and that was included in the packet for this week. And also at that meeting, I made it clear that I couldn't answer detailed questions about the budget, but that Chris would come to the next meeting and he would be able to give you updates and answer more detailed questions. So Chris is here now, and I'll turn it over to him.
Great, thanks, Dana. As we understand, this is, essentially an update. We are in the process of actually doing our final detailed estimate in the coming weeks. So we're producing outline specifications, which are going to give our entire team, our estimating team, that next level of detail to really give us the confidence as we head towards the coming months for that May bond vote, that we'll have even yet more detail coming towards the end of this month. So just wanted to provide you all with that context. As Dana said, we've prepared what is already, I would characterize as a detailed estimate. There's about 10 pages of actual detail that comprises this one-page summary that we've provided all of you. In order to keep this conversation in the context of that total budget, which, as Dana mentioned, we're at about $16.5 million for the total project budget. Now, one thing that we wanted to make very clear is that we fully anticipate with a geothermal heating and cooling system to be able to capitalize on $540,000 of project savings from the federal government, which will bring the total project cost down to right about $16 million. So we're very excited to be able to be in a position to present what we think is a real benefit, not only from a first instance, but also a long-term energy and operating costs of the library. So with that, I suppose, why don't I just open it up to any questions that folks have relative to that one-page total project budget summary.
Well, Chris, a quick one that comes to mind is other large geothermal heating projects that you've done.
Yeah, actually, we have several in place. One of the largest that we just installed is the OnLogic project. It's right in South Burlington. It's a new tech center. They build rugged computers. It's about a $50 million project, and we leveraged this same Inflation Reduction Act monies to offset the upfront cost for the geothermal. Now, in the past, we found that geothermal was really outside of the initial costs, and because of the Inflation Reduction Act, it's actually bringing this cost down to the point where it's essentially a zero time payback for the system. So we're very, very excited to be able to leverage that. We have an initial study on the geology of the site, which indicates that, and we've got a final report coming in the next couple of weeks, which indicates that we think that an open loop geothermal system is going to be well suited for this site. Also, our team, we Middlebury Architects, did a geothermal system for the South Burlington Library and City Hall project that was recently completed. We have also a number of others that are in construction currently.
And the performance from OnLogic has been what you'd expect?
So the project is just being occupied right now.
Gotcha.
So it's really gonna be the next year. But the performance is actually fairly easy to calculate. It's really are the production wells the capacity that we anticipate, and that really we won't know here on this site until we do an actual test well, which in this case would be occurring after a positive bond vote.
Gotcha.
Chris, how does that Inflation Reduction Act work? They write us a check back?
Essentially, Brian, yes, and frankly, it can be a little bit confusing, in the way in which we have accounted for it in this total project budget is essentially to say that we'll have to have the funds in place for a $16.5 million project. And then after the project is completed and the proper information is submitted to the federal government, the town will receive that payment in what we're estimating right now, conservatively, by the way, is a 30%, that equates to $540,000. Now, if you use all American made systems and parts and pieces, we get another 10%, which we've been successful on several of our projects. So we're estimating it at 30% right now, Brian, that's the $540,000. We're hopeful that we can get to 40% savings.
I was just curious because I'm used to the tax credit side, and where we don't pay taxes, I didn't know how we were going to get our money. And is there a window when it has to be reappropriated, or how long is that good for?
No, Brian, once the, in your case as a town, as a community, once the project is completed and we submit the required, backup materials to demonstrate, the exact cost of the system, that money comes back from the federal government to the town in the form of a payment.
Okay, I'm used to, like, on the private citizen side, on the tax rebates, it gets, basically goes year to year. And we're definitely not going to have the project done next year. So we're sure we'll be good into 25 with that plan.
Yeah, and in fact, Brian, no, right, it would probably be 2026 by the time that, the town would see those funds.
I'm not worried about seeing the funds if you tell me. I'm talking that it's a guarantee that if we do our paperwork right, we'll get those funds.
Correct. And Brian, we will certainly be verifying that before the systems are finally designed and so on.
Okay, because solar installation, it has to be functioning by the 31st of December, or you're subject to the following year's tax rules, which could be different. So.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Here's a question from Fred.
Fred, I think you're unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I have two questions. Tell me, I see in the mass timber, you've got a reduction and an addition.
Yeah.
I'm curious what that's about. And my second question is, what are you gonna do to the lower parking lot? Expand the realignment for $212,000.
Sure. I'll jump right into that. Fred, as you and the select board are aware from past projects, one way to manage a budget such as this is to have a series of what we call alternates. So those could either be additive or deductive alternates. We've listed about 12 alternates to date. Some will add cost if we elect to choose them. Some will remove cost from the project. Now, this again is one way that we as a team manage to what the select board and ultimately the voters of Middlebury will support, an X number total bond. So this is one of our tools to manage that number. So in our current estimate, we have included a portion of the overall building as mass timber. Mass timber is, as many of you know, it's a way to sequester carbon in our modern, building toolkit, if you will. So some of the building, as it's considered currently in the estimate, some of it's mass timber and some of it is conventional steel framing and concrete slabs, okay? So if, Fred, if we were to deduct the mass timber from the project and go strictly with concrete and steel, that would reduce the project cost by about $242,000, okay? And then, if we also went with an entirely mass timber frame, that would add another $386,000. Now, to address your other question.
In addition to the 242?
Yes, to do a full mass timber of the whole building, the whole addition.
So mass timber overall, for all the carbon benefits of the left timber is $500,000?
Correct. Yep. And Fred, one thing that I will say is we're just completing a mass timber project right now, 3-story. It's down in Lebanon, New Hampshire. It's about a $22 million project. The cost of mass timber is coming down because, more materials are being sourced and it's, more available. And this is our snapshot, excuse me, at this point in time. We'll be studying it, again, as we move after a bond vote, assuming positive bond vote, to, identify other sources and opportunities to bring that cost down.
Thank you. Tell me about the parking lot.
Yeah, so on the parking lot, this $212,000 number actually contemplates realignment, restriping, a whole new top course of paving over the entire lot. We believe it exceeds what is, ultimately required for gaining additional parking spaces. That's really the goal here, is we've maintained within one space the upper parking lot. Now we're looking to maximize the lower level lot as best we can. We firmly believe that there's going to be a way to do this for less than $200,000. This again,
Sorry, liquid striking it could be less the retaining walls in this.
Absolutely. We're still early, Fred, in the engineering. We're working with Otter Creek Engineering, along with our architecture team, Wing and Lanfair. So this is the snapshot at this moment in time. We are going to be meeting informally with Jen Murray, as well as Fire Chief Shaw, just to, again, here's what we're thinking early in the process and so on. Are there any issues that we believe need to be addressed, et cetera?
Thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fred.
Questions? Chris, and I have another question. The construction cost estimate, that's a point in time of present, and then the escalation to fall 2024 is the projected future cost at our earliest expected start date? Is that what we have here? Realistic expected start date? So we would be into it winter of 25. Or no,
Correct.
winter 25. Yeah.
That's all right, yeah. So Brian, we anticipate, or approximately estimating right now that it's about 56 weeks of construction, so roughly 13 months overall duration. Starting, breaking ground in the fall, we fully acknowledge is aggressive. That's a very aggressive schedule with a May bond vote. We have to, finish drawings, construction documents, and get out to bid to all the local and regional subcontractors. So right now, the market is indicating to us, and we're keeping very, very close tabs on this nationally through a number of different sources. We're looking at a 4.5% escalation from today to that time, as we say, fall of 2024. Now, Several things that we're gonna be looking at, Brian, very, very carefully, and we've talked about this with the project team, is that very often we find minimizing winter conditions and getting full subcontractor involvement in a spring bid, so spring of 2025, could help offset, some costs. Now, it's a balancing act because the market has been unlike anything that any of us have seen. So crystal ball still says that there is going to continue to be escalation, so, right, beyond the fall. Now, we're always balancing those other benefits, so like I said, winter conditions and so on.
Okay.
So, without talking too much, I hope that.
No, I'm with you. I'm just trying to follow your reasoning here. And then, when does our ARPA funding have to be used by?
It has to be committed by the end of this year and spent by December 31st, 2026.
26? Okay, yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that's driving some of the guys that you'll be using on this type of a project is all of the ARPA funds, so. And just a question on the mass timber. Is this a design element that it adds to the appearance, or why did we get into the mass timber discussion?
Sure, no, that's a great question, Brian, and it is a new technology that we're basically seeing. The concept is you're using wood materials that really can't be used otherwise, because you're basically glue laminating smaller pieces of wood to create big timbers to build from, almost like building an old mill building with large timbers, but this is with smaller laminated pieces. The true benefit, though, is in its carbon sequestration properties. So essentially, we're out of the ground with a building that really, the whole structural frame and steel and concrete are really high in carbon. So it's a real benefit from a sustainability perspective. The other benefit is it's actually really beautiful as a finished product on the interior of the new edition of the library. So you're sort of looking at the historic library as one context with the old oak that's sort of stained dark, and this is a natural, a brighter, lighter material that is the actual structural frame. So it's something, Brian, that frankly, we can make a decision, and it doesn't even have to be now. It could frankly be after bond vote to go with mass timber or not.
Yeah.
It's sort of like many other aspects of the overall composition of the project, exterior materials, finishes, and so on. Much of that really will be determined in its final form after, from May on, after bond vote.
Just trying to educate myself. Thanks.
Yep.
And if I could just remind the board that I believe that our contract with REARC and Wingland Fear was to get our schematic design up to a certain point, which was about 65, sort of 2/3 of the way along. It wasn't complete schematic design. It was to get us to the point where we have a good enough feel for the cost of the project to proceed with the bond vote. So all this to say that once the bond vote happens, we can't just turn around and start building. There's more work to be done at that point.
Yeah. I suppose if you have any questions as a follow-up afterwards, that we can collect them and get them through to Dana and Joe, and they can get us feedback.
Can I just ask one quick?
Yeah,
one
of
thing?
course.
So this estimate does not include any relocation costs during that 56 weeks of construction and renting and storage and all that. We're still not including that in this number, correct?
Actually, we do have a number, we have $100,000 placeholder in this number. And what we are working on actually aggressively right now is also, is all of the owner's costs, right? So, for our next presentation, we'll explain and show you all of the little pieces that are included in the owner's costs. And right now, we've got $1.67 million associated with the owner's cost. Of that, as I say, $100,000 is associated with temporary relocation. We also have $400,000 as an allowance right now that we're verifying for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. There's permitting fees in that number, and host. There's an owner's contingency actually of 5% in there that's roughly $650,000.
So this price does include
Some
some money.
unknown what that cost would be.
Okay,
We need to develop that some more.
okay. Okay,
And this is probably more of a question for Joe. This is with everything, Joe and Dana, this was with everything that you were hoping for as far as flow and layout programmatically at this point with this particular budget.
Yep, this accomplishes our program.
Yeah.
We can fit everything that we wanted in here, and the layout is fantastic. It is a high-functioning, wonderful library that would bring a lot of improvements to the community.
And I would say that at one point, we did consider another option to bring costs down that would have eliminated one of the entrances, sort of the rear entrance that would bring people into the community meeting room in the evening, and it would bring the square footage down. It would save us some space. We just really didn't like the way that the flow worked with for people. So I would say that we're quite happy with this at this point. It seems really functional. It seems like it'll really serve the needs of the community. And if we're thinking ahead to the future of the town, which I think is what we want to be doing, I think this would set us up very nicely for the future.
Okay. Lindsay, did you have any questions?
No, not specifically. I'm amazed to see it all coming together, and I'm, just excited to be here. Sorry.
That's all right.
I will have more as time goes on, but right now I do not.
Okay. All right. Well then, Dana, Chris, Joe, we thank you for joining us this evening and appreciate the presentation.
All right, thanks everyone. If you have follow-up thoughts or questions, just send them along.
Thank you.
Good to see everyone. Take
Cheers.
care.
Now in the 9 is 9 rule.
Right. Is 11, is 9, is what?
9. Oh, 9 is 10. Come on forward. We just got to your place as you're walking in the door. So-
Perfect timing.
That's really unusual. That's wonderful.
Yeah. No, this is all by design around here. Come
Tightly
on.
choreographed.
Come on.
Thanks for moving it around. The class we're taking is pretty important, so thank you.
So Kate, we're here to hear from you guys as far as your budget request and the move to contractual services that you would like to do and anything else that you would like to present to us. I'm sure we may have some questions afterwards, but we'll turn the mic over to you.
So, sure, I'll start with, we put out the contract to maybe move the way the ask was to make it equitable between all of the towns, simplify it, and get us more on par with the services we're providing for the way we're asking it. That simplified piece might not have happened how we were hoping. So we may be rolling out a little bit more of a simplified ask.
Yeah, we still have towns where if we're asking for an appropriation increase, they're asking us to go collect signatures and petition and then get on the ballot as, a separate line item. And what we're hoping to correct was the perception that we're like many of the other nonprofits that are coming and asking for a donation from the towns every year. It's simply not the case. It is a fee for service. And I think we'll be able to explain that a bit better through the course of this presentation we put together. But the reimbursement rates are such that we lose money on calls. And it's not just us, it's every EMS organization. And you, I'm sure, are reading about it in the news. If you're not, check out Vermont Digger. It's something that's being dealt with at a state level, and there are attempts to work at it at a federal level, but that takes time. And until then, we need to supplement the revenue stream with appropriations from the towns. But it's not an ask for a donation. It is truly a fee for a necessary service, and that's what we're hoping to convey. Much like the towns will engage with maybe DNF to have their paving services done, or an IT company to handle their IT services. We're your emergency service company. And yes, you could look at other options, but this is what we're putting out.
So I know, and I'm not sure necessarily here, but for the couple of select boards we've already talked to, and two of them that had lawyers on them had some concerns with some of the language that was in the contract. So what we thought would be a simplified way to maybe change how the ask was done. I don't want to say it backfired, but we're trying to back it up to make it even more simplified. One of the towns said that they were unable to bind a general fund past the term that they were on. So basically, we're going to move back to it, right? But we didn't think so. So it'll be, we're looking to do a yearly ask at a date that works for every select board, with a payment date that works for every town. Some are on a yearly budget, some are on a fiscal.
Is your budgeting done on the town fiscal calendar or on the calendar?
We're a fiscal.
We're
Yeah.
fiscal,
Yeah.
but not most are, but not every town has to be.
Sure.
Right.
So, our initial thought would be, something like we've done before by October 1st. We'll put out our request with some numbers and the little excerpt that can go into the town report for the number of calls we've done and, any highlights from our business for the year.
Your FY is July 1.
Yeah.
So we prepared a presentation this evening, and we felt it was important to kind of outline a little bit of who we are as an agency, where we've come from, and what we do, but also really be transparent and kind of talk about some of our numbers so that you can understand the request for additional funding. I believe Kate and Ben have met all of you. My name's Walker. I'm relatively new to the admin team at Middlebury, but just so you know who you're talking to. So if we kind of get into it, Kate or Ben could speak to the history.
Certainly is.
Love the ambulance.
Right?
Classic.
But yeah, a great group of volunteers that founded Middlebury Volunteer Ambulance Association in 1970. I just was actually doing the last bit of cleaning out underneath the stairs and found some old run reports that T-Tall came to have a look through to see if there were any names we've missed, because usually we try to connect all of those founding members. So he stopped in yesterday.
But we're no longer really a volunteer organization, right?
Correct.
We have evolved like most EMS to the point where we are mostly staffed by career personnel. Right? And that is our biggest expense.
Yeah. And we'll speak to those numbers later on. Slide, please. So kind of outlining our mission, as you guys can read there, right? The overall purpose, although we are operating as a business and asking for funding to help support us, is really to provide the highest level of care possible to our community. And that takes a couple of different forms. It's not only 911 calls, another large portion of what we do, and also is a way that we've diversified to try to help compensate for the high cost and low reimbursement is doing some transfers. Typically, those are from Porter Hospital going up to UVM, which is a definitive level of care. So it's kind of contrary to what you'd believe of like that every hospital is made the same. Smaller hospitals do have some limitations. So some things are truly emergent, and we can take those up to UVM.
And that's guaranteed revenue for us, right? That's money we know we're going to get. That's why it's an important piece of the business model. Not every ambulance service does that.
Yeah. So we're really prioritizing providing the best care we can, and we're trying to do our best to make it financially feasible for everyone involved. We also are one of only 2 ambulance services left in the state that provide vehicle extrication services. That would be us and Mad River Ambulance just over the mountain. So kind of a unique thing we do. Ultimately, it does provide a cost saving to all the towns that we do extrication for. So instead of, I think our new set of tools was over $50,000 for like the new high-tech stuff. Instead of every town needing to spend 50 grand on that, one agency is doing it, and then everyone can reap the benefits of centralized training and stuff. So it is really trying to do what's best for the region.
And we lose money on those. There's no billing for the heavy rescue, right?
We do.
No.
Sure. So out of the 3 ambulance services we have in Addison County, we're the only paramedic level ambulance service. And again, in a future slide, it'll show a little bit of difference what paramedics can do. But it is a college degree. It takes 2 years. And a lot of time we are very, very fortunate to have one paramedic volunteer with us who we appreciate all the time he does give us. We have 2 ambulances that run regularly. One's on 24/7. That one's staffed with a paramedic. And then we have a second truck that runs from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. We also have a model. All of our phones have this app called Active 911. So if there's need for additional resources, a motor vehicle accident, an MCI of any kind, or just another transfer, we put out on this Active 911 to see if we can get additional staff to come in. And that's not uncommon that we have all 4 trucks on the road for one reason or another. We also have a trailer which we've used for multi-purposes and 2 sport vehicles.
Do you want questions as you go through? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
what's the health of your vehicular fleet nowadays? I know a lot of our money initially was to upgrade the ambulance
Great question.
fleet. And what's the mileage on your ambulances now, and what kind of?
Well, I mean, the good news, diesels tend to take the mileage, but we are over 300,000 on the 3rd and 4th out trucks. One is scheduled for replacement. We did order that last year. We had expect to take possession of it this year, but they're now telling us it may be 25 before we see it.
A lot of it's just kind of stretching the life to do our best to keep as many ambulances available as possible. And the cost of ambulances continues to increase. Even from when we ordered that to this year, there's already been a huge price hike.
When you ordered that, did they lock the price?
They did.
It's
They did,
fortunate.
and it was such an increase from one to the other. We hesitated locking it in because we had hoped it would go down. So they did. I mean, but they actually put in writing that should, the cab and chassis come in at a lower rate, they would pass the savings on to us. But
Wow. One-way luck. That's nice.
But it went from 191,000 to 249,000. So, I mean,
Sir.
yeah. The only difference between those two trucks was one was a 350 and the next one was a 450.
Sure.
The F-350s were struggling a little bit to carry the load. So it's been recommended we go to the two 450s. But we have a 2015, 17, 21.
Yeah, two of them are pretty close together.
And yeah.
22, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. So if we kind of look at the state of Vermont, we thought it was important to talk about the health of EMS in the state. If you guys have been reading the news, which I imagine you do, you'll see a lot of different things regarding EMS and its funding. So Middlebury Ambulance, we are one of 78 services in the state. It's worth noting that in 2023, 3 ambulance services closed and their service areas were passed along to other agencies nearby. Not trying to be alarmist, but just showing that there really are a lot of places out there struggling, and we're trying our best to stay as viable as possible.
So those agencies disappearing, was it a planned merger or they just couldn't maintain operations?
A lot of them.
A lot of them.
Sorry.
I had put out a survey myself, and then Vermont Ambulance Association followed on the heels, trying to get what everybody's per capita was, what their service area consisted of, what models they were using. Like, we were all in this together. And one of them answered the question of what their town appropriation was with woefully too low.
Uh-huh.
And their plan was to try and figure out what it would take to keep running. And 3 months later, they closed their doors.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that particular ambulance service area.
That is not a
was
planned
split up.
merger. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know the same happened with Mount Holly. Like they couldn't reach an agreement with the town on funding levels, and then Ludlow picked it up. So
Yeah.
Just gonna
Yeah,
put this in front of us.
Right now, is there ambulance service statewide? Like you'll get
there-
an ambulance
there are
anywhere?
deserts.
There are.
They're deserts. So the response times in those regions are extremely long. We didn't include that map, but there was a very, it is in the next slide.
Third.
There.
No, it's not.
That's
that
not
one.
the desert map.
There
If it's
are
coming,
the
that's fine.
Northeast
Anyway,
Kingdom.
we can provide
some
an
of the mountain
interesting one.
communities.
Yeah, but kind of breaking down the billing, which we think is an important part, because if you look at some of the pie charts we saw that had been prepared and stuff, it's interesting what our overall billing is versus what our actual revenue is. And to break down how our billing works, it's important to see what our main payers are. So Medicare and Medicaid make up 77% of our payer mix. And what's pertinent about that is if you look kind of at the breakdown of the levels, you have BLS emergent, ALS emergent, and then the ALS level 2. So those are the different rates that can be billed at. So no matter how much money that call cost us, or however much equipment, expertise, experience we use, diesel, whatever it is, they will only pay us those fixed amounts plus the mileage. So it doesn't matter how much equipment we go through. On our next slide, we're going to kind of talk about that. You want to speak to the copay, how that plays in?
Yeah, so if, in our next slide, we'll show like a genuine cost breakdown of a cardiac arrest at an ALS2 rate. But depending on which insurance, at the highest, one of the Medicare Part C's is a $250 copay. But from that $250, whatever the copay is, that's deducted from us and then charged to the insured.
Right.
And that is a lot of what we see not paid. The very small 200.
But if that's adding up over a couple thousand calls a year, it really does make a big difference in our budget.
But if you're a household struggling to buy food or medication or heating fuel, and then you get an ambulance bill for services that you've already received, that's the last thing you're going to pay. Sure.
Right.
We do not aggressively send our accounts receivable to collections. We in-house collect. We send letters. We make some phone calls.
Wow.
But at the end of the day, we're not taking someone to court so they don't have heat. You know, that's not what an organization that's meant to help people. That's not how we feel we should pursue getting other funds. So if we go to the next slide, we have one more on payer breakdown, and then I think it's one more below. So this is just a different way of showing it just in a pie chart. same stat, the 77%, but you can kind of see our breakdown. And it's surprising, Vermont only has about a 3% uninsured rate, which is pretty impressive compared to the national averages,
Which is 7.7.
which is around 7%. But what's interesting is despite having such a high population with insurance, we still have these funding deficits with our reimbursement.
Because they might have insurance, but they're underinsured.
Underinsured, very high copay, stuff like that, and they can't afford that copay. So all we're getting is that small fixed rate or whatever the insurance is willing to give us.
As the insurance costs rise, people will take a higher deductible, so their premiums aren't as high.
Sure.
And then they struggle to meet the
Right.
payment for their high deductibles.
So the next page, just at a high level, the green line is, our costs, what we're charging. And the red line reflects the reimbursement rate. So the gap that we need to close to maintain, successful operations is that gap between the red and green lines.
And so you'll notice there's that huge kind of nosedive in the last 3 months. That's due to the billing and payment cycle typically takes 30 to 90 days. So if you can kind of look October back into the year, you'll see a more accurate of kind of what that trend is. And you think about any business, like no store could stay open if they only were received 55% of what they were supposed to be receiving for any service or good. So that's the gap.
And so let's get into the cost on this call.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. So Middlebury ambulance respond 123 street lane for a male patient who is unresponsive, breathing, unknown if CPR is in progress, right? So that could happen at any time. Thank you. You'll kind of see the first aisle is disposable goods. So those are all life-saving pieces of equipment with relatively high expenses that are going to be thrown out at the end of that call. We're happy to get into the details, and I'm a real geek when it comes to medicine, but really all it is there's a ton of things that help save a life, and they're all very expensive. So that comes out to $380 for this mock cardiac arrest scenario. Next, we have our medications, which we push the medications and then they hopefully had the effect we wanted. But again, those are not going to ever be reused in any way. So there's $133 gone. We look at our staffing per AHA guidelines, right? The American Heart Association. A minimum of 6 providers is preferred for a cardiac arrest, and often it takes more providers than that. So with our 2 staffed ambulances, right? If one's not available, whatever that may be, we're going to be having other people respond from home typically. And then a cardiac arrest, let's say in the town of Middlebury, luckily we're not driving too far, but that call from time of tones to the time our truck is cleaned up and back in service is typically 2 to 3 hours. And then subsequently, if we are fortunate and able to restart that patient, they have a pulse, we call that ROSC. They're going to go to Porter, and then we're going to be taking one of our paramedic trucks to bring that patient up to UVM in many cases to continue getting the care that they need. So that's all of our kind of soft good costs, right? The disposable goods, the medication, and our staffing rate.
And if I could just interject.
Absolutely.
That is very realistic. That isn't like what we might use. That is very indicative of what we would use on a cardiac arrest.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and that is one of our more equipment intensive calls, but we thought that was a good example because when you think an ambulance, that's kind of what you think of.
It's a great example.
And then when we look at the equipment, right, we have almost $67,000 worth of just equipment that we use on that call to help potentially save that life. And then all that equipment, all the supplies and providers are going to be loaded in to $305,000 worth of transport. So the ambulance, the stretcher, the power load system. And then when we look at it, we're looking at around $1,000 in just those soft good costs, not counting any of the equipment, ambulance upkeep, the pay for the staff when they're not responding to this call, building upkeep and such. You guys can continue to break it down probably better than I could.
Did you want me to carry on?
Yeah, please.
So with those costs, if you go back and look at what our 77% of the time Medicaid, Medicare would call this an ALS 2 call. So we'd get $750 for the call.
Less the $250 copay.
Less a 20% copay.
So guaranteed pay of half of what just the soft goods cost for that call.
So we just wanted to explain that there is very much a gap between our insurance reimbursements and the cost. Now, there are some BLS calls that we don't use near that much. Sometimes we're just using the monitor for vitals, and
Yeah.
it doesn't take those disposable goods, but we just wanted to give an example.
And to help close that gap, we aren't putting all of it on the municipalities, right? We have a communication center, which is a revenue generator for us, right? And so we tone out for different departments. We do some call service. Our hope is to land more contracts for dispatch, which would offset the need to continue coming back, asking for more increases every year.
Who do you dispatch for?
So right now we're dispatching for a handful of fire. I mean, I can name the fire departments if you want, but
Okay.
Salisbury Fire, Weybridge Fire, Shoreham Fire and First Response, Orwell Fire and First Response. We dispatch ourselves, which is a huge cost savings.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we did just lose Missisquoi. We were dispatching them through an IP link.
Huh.
But they went with St. Albans.
Yeah.
When they called us, they were very upset. It said it wasn't anything to do
It's not
with
you.
our
it's us.
service.
Right.
But they were, police, fire, rescue, all in one building for them now. So
Yeah, that's great.
So we have the dispatch center. We have active fundraising campaigns.
we're also answering service for some doctors' offices. So we do after hours for Mapleview Oral Surgery, Rainbow Pediatric, all of the non-Porter doctors' offices.
Huh.
Mountain Health, Middlebury Family Health, CSAC answering service. So we do a little bit of calls for that as well.
Neat. I didn't know any of that.
Trying to diversify as much as we can.
Sure.
But it's limited to some degree.
The next slide kind of addresses the current challenges, right? So we've established that there's insufficient reimbursements, right? There was a study or a report recently done. What was the organization that submitted that, Kate?
So VEMSAC, Vermont EMS Agency.
Advisory committee.
Advisory committee,
Yeah.
yes. So they've prepared a report that they've been getting. I went through a draft version, but it's what they're presenting to the legislative body, talking about EMS and the trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
But I could actually, when that's finalized, I can send a report.
Yeah.
Some of the
Good
highlights
reading.
from that are interesting and illuminating. They note that over the past 5 years, Vermont EMS providers have seen this 20% increase in call volume. We are an integral part of the healthcare system. As previously alluded to, most services are performed by career professionals, and there has been a dramatic turnover rate among EMS staffing and personnel. And the primary driver is the compensation, right? Or looking to get into another career field that's going to compensate them better, right? So it's also interesting to note that over those same 5 years where the call volume increased 20%, the number of licensed EMS providers only increased 1%, right? So we've got a very small pool of qualified personnel that we are all chasing. And regrettably, we are finding ourselves in a little bit of a salary race with other neighboring departments, where we're all raising our wages and our payrolls and compensation packages to try and retain and attract the people that we need. But that's why we're coming to the towns and asking for increases in the appropriations. We asked for $3 this year. Truthfully, we feel we need to be at $19 per cap, but we weren't going to do it all at once and ask the town for a $9 increase. So our intention is to do $3 a year over the next 3 years. But who knows what may change in the interim, right? We may land a huge contract with dispatch. Or something may change at the state or federal level where we don't need to ask for quite as much.
If your costs are $19 per capita, what are you doing while you're at $10, $13, and $16? Are you running deficits?
No, but we, like I said, we aren't on par with other agencies as far as pay scales.
I see.
So that's part of
Retention.
Yeah,
troubles.
and I think it's
And then
might
there's,
be,
depending on how you break down some of the numbers, there can be a deficit with the replacement fund of depending on what the
Deferred equipment.
$40,000 monitor, the
Sure.
$250,000 ambulance, those replacements aren't always fully covered in the budget.
Perfect.
So we're really relying on outside donations for some of those. So it would make us more independent in that sense, but would really allow us to increase our benefits package. A lot of these big municipalities pay pensions, crazy numbers of sick days, vacation days, stuff that we just can't compete with currently.
Sure.
what we have been able to do though is provide a great work environment. And so we do have some loyalty with the staff we have. But when somebody, and again, this is, this isn't, to startle or, but one of it's close enough, Werva, White River Valley Ambulance, across the mountain, their per capita is 72. They can pay better than us. And it's not that far of a drive. It is not that far.
So we're not.
So their base pay scale for their staff is a little bit better than ours. There's been a couple of other neighboring agencies that have said like we need to increase our pay scale and we need to follow suit because we can't lose who we have. We're running an EMT class right now, so we're hoping to gain interest.
Develop the local talent. Two other quick questions. Have you seen a reduction in turnover in the last year or half year? It feels like maybe the COVID-inspired work rotation is slowing down a little bit.
I think we've stayed steady.
Yeah.
Fairly similar. An interesting thing when we break down that 1% increase over the past 5 years is 17% of Vermont EMS providers are below the level of EMT. And we're going to kind of talk about that in the further slide. But I think if I recall the stats, it was somewhere around 400 plus of those providers are at the Vermont Emergency First Responder level, which was created in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So although we've increased 1% of the approximately 2,000 something, few thousand Vermont EMS providers, in reality, the level of licensed providers at EMT or above has lessened.
Sure.
So it's kind of like a Band-Aid that the state's trying to provide to help these systems.
It lets them have someone qualified to drive the ambulance,
but not
and
really
then
provide
someone
care.
qualified to provide care and back.
Yeah.
Right, so Centers for Medicaid Services say in order to be able to bill for the call. So if there was a call right now and I grabbed Ben to go on it, and yep, he can drive, so he brings me in, I cannot bill for that call because there was only one licensed provider on the truck. So Vermont came up with this idea, and if you move to the next slide, it'll show the different ones to give people without the huge financial and time commitment to become, we'll go to the third one, an EMT, just the taste of it. So you could get, it's Vermont only, it's not a nationally certified, it's a V for class. And it's basically a little more than your standard AHA first aid CPR class. And it can be done in 16 hours. And the thought was that if you took that class, you love it, and then continue on through the different levels. So it would be like a small input of time and financial costs to give it a try, basically.
Yeah.
We don't like that model. That's not who we regularly staff. We don't feel that they have enough training, but we certainly have two that do not run on the truck regularly, but they'll jump calls and come in and help. They'll drive a transfer. We have a transfer at 2:00 in the morning. We put the page out. We have a VFR. We love him. He's at 2:00 in the morning. I'll come in and drive that.
Right. He's on our
Perfect.
education team, comes in when we need it. Yeah.
Perfect place. Do you want to talk about the levels?
Absolutely. Did you have any questions before we got into the.
I assume you're going to get to it, but I was just curious, what % of your operating budget is that $10, $13 per capita versus your fee reimbursement?
Absolutely. We do get to that in a
Okay,
later
that's
slide, I
fine.
believe. Yeah. So like Kate was saying, with kind of that 17% of the providers that are making up the 1% increase in our overall, we like to stay at the EMT level and above. We feel that that is the best way for us to continue to provide the quality care that we really take pride in. You know, we were awarded Ambulance Service of the Year recently, and that was for the quality care we provide, some of our initiatives and creative solutions to things. So we really take pride in that. When you look at an EMT class, that's kind of the minimum level that can staff an ambulance in the back. Basic level of care, bleeding control, CPR, epi for anaphylaxis, that type of stuff. When we move up, and that's 120 hours of training, and pretty much everyone does that on their own time. That's a volunteer. You choose to take a course because you want to help.
And that EMT level, just to be clear, that is the lowest certified level that can actually do patient care.
Mm.
The EMR and the VFR can help on scene, and then they can drive, but they cannot do the patient care
During transport, yeah. So then the AEMT is, if you look, 120, it's 240 hours of training. So it's the kind of interim level, and it's very common in Vermont and other rural regions. In a lot of urban areas, they don't use it because it's not true ALS level of care. It's kind of like a Band-Aid. So they can start IVs, an unresponsive diabetic patient, they can start an IV and give sugar to help, pretty much correct that, which is a really cool medical emergency that we can actually fix in the field. They can give some meds, but pretty limited during cardiac arrest, and a handful of other interventions. And then we go up to kind of the gold standard of pre-hospital care, which is the paramedic level license. And like Kate was saying, that typically takes 2 years. It is, in many cases, an associate's degree. I was able to get mine through a bachelor's degree. It takes some money to do that. The average cost in the state of Vermont is around $25,000 to do that. And that is all, in most cases, you pay out of pocket. And then you're doing the 1,500 hours of school on your own time. And then you're also expected to do at least 1,000 hours of unpaid clinicals between the hospital and that. So you look at how expensive that is and how many hours it takes. And then you look at the pay of a paramedic versus, let's say, a nurse. Nurses in general make more than paramedics, although the autonomy, individual decision-making and such is less than a paramedic. So not to get into the whole healthcare system, but it just kind of shows that EMS is that kind of underfunded sibling of, typical healthcare that you would think of. Paramedics can do many things. They can do multiple forms of advanced airways, including intubation, which is definitive airway. They can do surgical airways, which is pretty, you see it on TV, but that's something that all our paramedics are trained to do.
Some MacGyver do something.
Yeah, with a
Right.
ballpoint pen.
I promise we don't use a pen. Needle decompressions. If a heart rate is going too fast, too slow, we can correct that with medication or electricity. There's around 40 medications that paramedics can give and a lot of advanced equipment. And again, we're the only paramedic service in the county. So not only do we cover our 10 towns, but we do paramedic intercepts for the surrounding agencies. So we are fortunate to be able to kind of provide that service to the surrounding area and our community.
And just one thing to note, because I know we kind of talked a bit about like the cardiac arrest. When you have a paramedic on scene, there is nothing the hospital can do for a cardiac arrest patient that we can't do in the field. And it is in our protocols that they don't want us transporting somebody that we have already gone through all of the steps and said that there isn't anything else we can do, because there's nothing else they can do.
Yeah.
Hopefully on the other side, we've done exactly what we hoped we could do, and we transport them because we got ROSC.
Right. Yeah. So we can go to the next slide. We just thought it was really important.
But, yeah, and
sorry.
if you just along the bottom, so we do have 2 VFers. We have 16 EMTs on staff. One of them's a volunteer. We have 8 AMTs with 1 volunteer and 9 paramedics with 1 volunteer. And out of all of that staff, we only have 8 full-timers with 4 having health insurance.
And increasing full-time staff would be a possible benefit of having increased per capita and additional funding to kind of help with that consistency and quality of care. Oh, so we do have the
Here's
desert
the
map.
desert map.
There you go.
There it is.
Yeah.
Speak to that.
If you'd like to. Yeah, just back at what we were talking, with the 21 participants I got from the survey, then the Vermont Ambulance Association, that is the average, $46.38. That doesn't account for municipalities where if it's a fire EMS based system, which I know that's comparing apples to oranges because they're offering two services under one roof. But those for the 2-3 I've seen, if you break it out into a per capita, it's over $300 per capita to offer both.
Next. That's it. Wonderful.
So you want to talk about our resources?
Yeah. Well, I do know we have some graphs, and I don't know if you want to.
Do you want me to pass out the budget breakdown? So we brought along some printed out resources because I know
Do they have the budget?
there are some questions regarding what our budget is, where the
Budget
money
is in your
goes.
packet.
Oh, it is in there.
So you have the packet. We printed it out as well, but if you have it, we won't
Oh,
walk around.
that came late this
Yeah, I know
afternoon. That
that was-
is not in the packet. So
Okay.
I have
Cool.
copies as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy.
So Andy, you had a question about, how much is payroll? One of those pie charts shows it pretty well, what percentage of our budget.
Comes from the per capita.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I was curious, what percent of your total revenue does the per capita make up versus your fee for service?
Got it. So our operating budget is about 2.9 million, and we are getting about 160, 170,000 from municipal appropriations.
Yeah.
I have that.
6-7%.
Yeah.
And to some degree, that percent speaks to how
Six.
well we do with trying to be self-sufficient in our funding and operations.
Sure.
Yeah, municipal taxes, 6%.
So, yeah, no. Any questions of the breakdown as we kind of look through this?
Or any other questions?
What is direct public support?
So that is a mix of our fundraising grants. Make sure.
Is this subscription program
That would
in
be
that?
the subscription program, our winter campaign.
Which responds like to the mailings that you send out.
Yep. Yeah, we do, well, I don't want to say 2 drives, but we do 2 bulk mailings. One will come out in January, and that is our winter campaign, just looking for general donations. And then we send one out in June for the subscription. So if you are familiar with those, if not, I can speak to it.
I'm not sure if I understand the municipal appropriations where you only took in 10,000. 10,000 is you budgeted for 209.
That's because of when people pay.
Okay.
And this was, yeah.
This is like looking at like one of our town reports where this is partial year
Yes,
versus
partial year.
what
Yes.
they've.
So the other half of the year better be really good.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And it's same deal like when we're paying like school taxes, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden we pay those school taxes and it changes the
Yeah, I
picture of our.
I need to ask the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is the budget for January to June, or is it for that time period, July to December?
No, the July to December is showing actual year to date. The budget is July to June, right?
That's whole year budget?
Yeah. I believe, right?
It can't be.
Wait,
It can't
I'm
be
sorry,
that
what
far
was the
off on your
question?
budget on revenues and expenses. It looks like it's a half-year budget.
Ask Kate the question
It
again.
does.
She can
It does look
clarify.
like a
This
half
is
year.
a half-year budget.
Is that for January? Is that for the period that you have actual data, or is that your January to June budget?
That is July through December.
Okay, so you had budgeted to have the municipal appropriations, but we haven't paid you yet, for instance, because I know
I think with some of that, because again, there's never a hard fast, this is exactly when we're expecting it. I think that we had budgeted that we would get it for the year, and probably by the time I got this from Darlene at the end of December, some of what was out there hadn't come in, but that's just shy of what we're expecting. The 209.
So your communication center is a pretty good deal for you now.
It is. I know we'll go into executive session to discuss some finances that I would love to.
Okay. Got it.
Well, we don't have to unless you want to.
Yeah. I think that you were more comfortable having it done that way. So we're fine doing it that way.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have some
Yeah,
questions
please.
or some comments. So, going back to the conversation about contracts. So from my perspective, in my history with the town, anytime we get into a situation where we're dealing with a contract, the contract is negotiated. It is not like, like you gave the paving example, right? If we're going to go out to paving, we're going to put that out to bid, right? In this particular case, it would be a situation of a, what do we call it? Only one
Sole
sole source, right? Because there's not other opportunities for us. But we would still have the opportunity, if it's a contract, to negotiate that. We wouldn't be presented with, here's what you're going to pay. So from our perspective, my perspective, I should say, when we're presented with a contract, it felt a little, not good, right? Because if you want a contract, then we should have been approached that you wanted to go that way, and we should be able to negotiate, right? Because we negotiate contracts for, unions, for,
Yeah.
for everything, for cameras, for our police, our water metering equipment. We have contracts for all kinds of things, but we're able to negotiate those things, right?
Sure.
So I just wanted to just explain that from our perspective a little bit, I shouldn't say our perspective, I should say my perspective, because I'm really speaking from me and my experiences. So
It makes sense, and we heard it from other communities. I think the messaging around our intent was lacking, and I apologize for that. Regrettably, we don't feel like there is a whole lot of room for negotiation with individual communities.
Yeah.
We're not going to charge a different rate to different towns, right?
Right.
It just wouldn't be equitable.
right.
But your point is well taken.
Yeah. And we don't have to go back and forth on it. I just wanted to share a little bit about the feeling around that word, I guess, is maybe.
Yeah, maybe, like I was trying to articulate, the thought behind it might have been to streamline things between the 10 towns, to change the relationship to the towns that are going to take it and put it out onto the floor. I don't want a town to be without an ambulance service because they didn't understand all of what we're explaining here. We wanted to change the relationships that we have with the select board so we could say, this is what's going on, come to our meeting, we'll tell you what we're doing. We feel good about what we're doing. We want to say like, hey, we're giving you a great deal. Just keep supporting us, and here's why we need to ask a little bit more this year. I didn't want to not be standing outside somewhere collecting signatures so we could be put on the ballot. So that was more the intent where, we sort of feel like it's been an unwritten contract. We ask the towns for some money, we're put in there, and we do provide the services to the town.
I think reframing it as a fee-for-service agreement is, a very streamlined way to handle it.
Yeah, that being said,
So what happens if a town doesn't do a fee for service or a contract or whatever, you guys can't not provide the service,
So
right?
we would not provide the service.
So if the town of Middlebury said, I'm sorry, we're not, it basically means that our
Well, it
community
means,
doesn't have.
it would mean you would likely be compelled to go to Virgins or Bristol and see if they would provide the service and find out the rates at which they would do it.
So for me and my limited, knowledge of how all these things work, it sounds to me like we should have you as a municipal service, like we have a police department, like we have a fire department.
So-
And that you should, your people should be employees of our town,
But how then do we handle that equitably with 10 different towns,
yeah.
right?
I don't know. I certainly don't have all the answers, but do you see what I like?
It feels like a municipal service.
Yeah.
In the large, dense metropolitan areas of the state, it tends to be a municipal service. Outside of that, in the rural areas, it is not.
I just wonder if there would be some cost savings in offering benefits and packages if we had the power of, a larger employer often has, more capacity to, so those are just things that I'm thinking about.
Can I quick piggyback on that, Heather?
Sure.
I was wondering what level of coordination there is among the county providers, right? You've got Brandon, Virgins, Bristol, and yourselves. Are there?
We do a lot of backup for them.
Okay. And not a lot of trying to, your territory is fairly well defined. You're not poaching transport between here and there and getting all.
So
No, so our areas are strictly defined, but we do provide mutual aid to services. So should we be out on 2 911 calls and a third one comes in, nobody answers the radio, Bristol comes in.
Vice versa with Bristol or any of those other regions, if their ambulances are busy, we would respond to assist them.
The problem comes in, which has been the case for services now and again, and very fortunately not Middlebury, is that we wind up becoming their primary service because they can't get coverage. So they let us know that they're out of service for 48 hours because they can't staff their ambulance, and then we're all taking a part of their service area.
Right, so that takes the 4 staffed ambulances in the county down to 3. And it's a very limited resources. Like granted, some people can come in who aren't on shift, but it's a finite resource that can be depleted quickly. But we have been working with kind of the leadership of some of the other agencies. Some are more interested than others, and just kind of communicating with hey, what are our futures? How can we help each other? So there's a lot of conversation and a lot of different levels and a lot of different ideas for the future.
Yeah,
There is an
exactly.
organizational structure. There's EMS districts in the state, Heather, that coordinate each of the departments underneath them and then coordinate together to try and achieve a lot of the things that you're talking about, right? It's not as though we're floating alone.
Yeah. And I don't, I don't know, I'm just talking about some of the things that I'm thinking about.
Absolutely.
Not that I know anything about anything.
And those are common topics.
No, but
about.
but to your point right there, though, Heather. I had lunch with the heads of service with Virgins and Bristol, and we kind of sat down and said, okay, what's everybody needing right now? So, without getting into a whole lot of medication, we had a pre-mixed Calinox. We all need to buy mixer valves now, and they're $3,600 each. And I'm like, what do we need to do to get together to buy these all together? So we're starting those discussions, to your point, maybe not municipal, but as a county service areas, is there some things we could get together for buying power?
By that state bids.
Right. So there's a lot of talk, and the state has been at the state level been talking about really regionalization and stuff of emergency resources. And I think in the next 8-10 years, there's going to be a lot of evolution with that and a lot of opportunities. And the state has been doing some purchasing. We received high flow nasal cannula systems through a state purchase system to kind of roll that out to us so that we can take those critically ill patients who need that level of care. It was a piece of equipment we could not afford. We didn't provide that service, or I guess potentially could afford, but they provided it to us, and we were able to roll that system out along with, I believe, a handful of other agencies received that. So there are some little things coming, but it's not system wide enough to make a big impact on budgets and services.
Sure.
I just
Sorry, yeah.
No, it's fine. It's totally fine. The other thing I would just say is what really struck me in the presentation when I was reviewing it is, and this goes across the board, I think, for the whole healthcare industry, is it's just not sustainable. And we as a select board we are struggling with our budget, and what we're asking the taxpayers to be able to afford, because as living in this community, costs for everything are going up, right? Costs for everything. So how do we be a fiscally responsible body if we can't control, some of these costs? And I know I realize what's going on for you guys, but I hope that somebody is advocating somewhere to say that this is not sustainable. I don't think that you guys can keep coming back to us every year and saying we need another 3, we need another 4, because we need to close this gap and it's constantly on the taxpayer's back. I think my answer to that is we've got to come up with a different model. For this year, I think next year, maybe a third year, okay. But at that point, I'm going to be like, no.
Talk to your state legislators.
Yeah, when I think we have, we have them in, once or twice a year, and we bring up stuff. I know that doesn't help you guys, but at some point, from where I'm sitting and what I have to present to the taxpayers, I'm just going to be like, I can't do it anymore.
I can't imagine reinventing the wheel either, right? Like it's.
But we have, I don't know what, like the same, our healthcare costs for the employees of the town are going up, 15-20% a year. And it's the same thing. It's not sustainable. We can't continue to, anyway.
On a small piece with that though, baby steps, right? I feel like with the whole healthcare industry and insurance reimbursements, it's like trying to turn a cruise ship, but, as of July, with the fee schedules we showed you, Medicare rates, Medicaid had its own separate rate, which was way less than that. And they did put into rule, and I think it went in as of July 1st of 23, that the Medicaid rate is now same as the Medicare. So, I mean, where that sounds like a little bit, that $750 fee schedule that we showed for ALS 2, if it was a Medicaid, would have been $350, $400. So, I mean, where it sounds like a baby step, that's like, hey, somebody realized that that's not enough.
Especially in an aging community like ours.
Exactly.
It's a lot of difference in your income. In the community the communities like Burlington's got a hospital right there. Does Burlington have its own ambulance system, or are they running
Combo fire and
Fire
rescue.
based.
It's under fire?
Yeah. If you look at any of these large municipalities, though, you'll see, although they all say they're firefighter paramedics, they're paramedic firefighters. The majority of these call volumes are EMS based. They have the big red expensive trucks, but a lot of what we're doing is, as fire-based EMS, is just EMS. So
Big expensive rich.
right, it's an unpopular opinion with firefighters. It's the reality of EMS systems.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a couple of things. With what Heather said, we've got a fire department, we've got a police department, we've got an ambulance service and a hospital. That's part of a triad. We need to have this. And that's why a lot of people come to live in this town, is because we have these people.
Yeah.
So as a percentage of our budget, it's pretty
We're not
minuscule.
growing that fast
What's that?
we're not growing on population right now. We need to build some houses.
No, I agree, but I'm gonna say something,
Go ahead.
let me continue.
Yeah.
Obviously, what they're asking for is kind of a big jump, but it's not necessarily out of line with other things that we've been dealing with. I had the same concerns that Heather did with the way you approached us, and that kind of set me off really big time in that. But I've never partaken of your services and I don't plan to. But, to compliment you, you're a valuable asset. From everything I've heard in the community, you're doing a great job. But we just need to have some input in what's going on. Another part of the contract that really concerned me is there's escalation clauses in there that we're not negotiating. You can do them at any time. And we need to have that contract say that we have control over we negotiate with you over those escalation charges, just for what Heather has said.
Well, Dan, again, that's why that's one of the reasons we're going to get rid of the contract and just do a fee for service agreement.
Okay.
But again, like, we can't negotiate with individual towns on the rate we're charging. We can't charge Middlebury a lower rate than we're going to charge Orwell or Salisbury or someone else. So, I understand your point about wanting to, have some influence over, how the service agreement is arranged. We're not trying to gouge you. We're offering you a pretty good deal relative to what's happening in the rest of the state. We're not going to be able to offer different terms to different municipalities.
I understand that, but early on in the year, you need to be talking to her about what the plans are. So when we come in the budget process, we get in a position in the budget process where we can help accommodate it instead of deep into where we're at.
Absolutely.
So would October 1st be?
You just have to work with October 1st.
Yeah.
Well,
But I'd
when
like
do you
to
want to
roll
go to
out-
the other towns? The bottom line is Middlebury is your lion's share. And if Middlebury votes it down, I don't see you sustaining an ambulance service without doing calls to Middlebury and being able to bill them and whatnot.
Look at what happened in Brattleboro.
I don't think we want to go there, right? So rather than come out and say, this is, I think back to Heather's, it ought to be a negotiation, a discussion. If you see us as a client as opposed to a partner, then you ought to come to us earlier on. Don't come to us with this is it, or we're not going to, if you guys vote it down, we're not going to give calls on you. That is bullshit way to do business. And that's the whole point I think that everybody wants to make. We were pretty set off with it's this or nothing. And that's not the way we do business. And it's not the way I'm sure you wanted to do business. Sounds like you've kind of got the word as you've been out that that's not the way the other towns want to either. But I'd like to get into our executive session personally.
Yeah.
Been
Been a great conversation with the night is
it has.
getting along with you.
If I could just add one more quick thing. So maybe we don't negotiate, but we have some conversation, and if it needs to be an executive session, because we can do that for contracts, but let's have some conversation about what you need and how we can work together. And, let's, before just coming and saying that, you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
can we try to work together to get you guys what we need, make sure that we're fiscally responsible to our taxpayers and we're doing the best we can on our budget to keep our tax rates reasonable. But let's just try to make it a two-way street as much as we can.
It's been very widespread and received that
Yeah.
the initial rollout of that wasn't perceived as it was meant to be. One of the tasks that we
It's
talked
okay.
about.
We're all learning here. It's,
Absolutely.
We want to move forward.
We were just going to say,
I did want to make this a more simplified thing to change the
And I get it. You
relationships
guys-
to the select boards, and that's not what happened.
yeah. And when talking about the role development, for me, when I took over in the deputy director role, that was one of our big things, was working on preparing presentations, even if it's once a year. If you guys have a month that's good for us to come in and share our call volume, share kind of what we've been up to, just to be that partnership that you guys are looking for, so that you know about us, we know about you, and we can kind of talk about what's coming down the pipeline in terms of our struggles, and you can kind of anticipate how we can help, how you can help, stuff like
And
that.
I think we want to help. We want to be good partner. Like we want to do what we can to support you, but we also have a responsibility too to the taxpayers. So
Absolutely.
we got to balance that the best we can.
We're both tasked with being fiscally responsible to the
Right.
communities we serve.
So
But
anyway,
Once you get done your year end and you know what your budget is for the next year, you're probably already working. I mean, we don't have to wait till our budget process for you to ask to come in and sit down with us and say, this is what it's looking like.
Absolutely.
When you got that 13-cent letter came to us in maybe September, it came to us quite a while ago, right?
End of October.
Has
End of April, August, sorry.
End of
Yeah.
August, yeah.
The meeting in October.
Yeah, because we sent it to the attorney to review and had provided you kind of our draft comments.
It did come with an invitation to come meet with us, right? And there were a few representatives.
Ben, here's the question. Who's the customer? When I want to meet with a customer of mine, I don't say, hey, you want my, if you want our business, then the invitation should have been the other way around.
I do know.
We'd like to come see you, not if you got time on our board meeting nights, come see us.
And that's what we'd hope to do in the future.
Again, this is an all learning thing. And with the struggles, I reached out to two of the larger ambulance services in the state and asked them what they did. And they said, here's a sample of the contract. And this is what we do. It's like, so I tried to take some advice with, some successful ambulance services and tried to follow a little bit of suit. They're like, invite everybody to a meeting, send them a sample, say this is what you're looking at, invite them to come talk to you. And
okay,
learned.
We'll move forward, right? We'll move forward and try to figure it out. So I do appreciate you and all you do for the community. And I don't want that,
It shouldn't be lost in the whole process.
Yes.
This is one of those deals. Finance is one thing, your performance on the operational side, and as a community pillar is noteworthy, and that doesn't, this discussion is more contentious than it needed to be, so. We got to give Dave a seat for a moment before we can get into next phase.
All right, I'll be brief.
Our timeline was optimistic.
We got to do warrants too.
I know.
Okay.
That's quick.
That doesn't take long.
So we thought it would be good to just give a brief update on what the town's restarted policy review committee has done. The group had its second meeting this past month. The first one was back at the very end of October. As you might remember, this was restarted back in the summer with a revised scope to allow the town to have a forum and the select board to have a forum, not just to occasionally review operational policies, but when an issue comes up that's kind of broad and more public policy related, that this may not be the best forum to have a large sort of scale discussion, but rather if there's research that needs done, if there's facts that needs gathering, another group could get into the weeds and present back to you. And the idea was that the concerns or the ideas would come from the select board generally down to the group. So they're not, it's not anecdotal. It's not purely one person who may be louder than the rest who says we need to talk about X or Y or Z, but rather the board is interested in digging in. So, part of the benefits of that is that it can save this board a lot of time. It can also, if we do research and find out that, hey, this issue really isn't, we don't think it's worthy of acting upon, it can prevent, a long debate over something that maybe isn't as relevant as it needs to be. So at any rate, we've dug into a number of topics. We've obviously picked the chair, and we're going to be meeting on a monthly basis. Some of the earlier topics that you may have heard about was first relating to short-term rental units, and there's a memo on the website you can read about that, talking about the degree to which that's actually impacting the town of Middlebury relative to the rest of the state. And you can read about it, but it's not nearly the issue that you'll find in the ski towns and in Burlington. It's part of the housing discussion, but not necessarily overwhelming the housing market here. The trend line is pretty neutral, and the numbers are low to begin with. Some other topics that came up that were raised relate to the town's winter parking ban. It's something that we looked into a little bit. Nearly every town in the state has a ban. It's pretty logical. Don't park on the street at night in case it snows, because somebody might need to do some plowing. We don't have to push your car out of the way. A couple towns have some variations, but we took a look at what those towns do and also the degree to which we've received any complaints. And I think, we sort of have a practical solution. There is a town, as you might remember, created some exempt sites on the streets on Pleasant Street to give some folks who may live in some of the what you call densest areas of Middlebury, who may not have off-street parking, a place to park. So we think that was a pretty suitable solution without changing any policies. Some of the others that somebody raised relates to security cameras. I know there was discussion earlier this fall about that in the public space, so not just on the police officers' persons or the building, but rather if the town should pursue that. And there is funding, I think, proposed in this budget for potential cameras. Somebody raised to the manager's office about whether a policy should be in place on how the cameras are handled and who can watch them and things like that. So it's without trying to reinvent the wheel. We've just reached out to a few of the larger towns in Vermont and asked them if they have a policy that we can review. There are two topics that I wanted to raise in the spirit of having them come to you before the committee acts on them, that were suggested by some of the new members of the committee. One of them is the naming of public spaces. As I'm sure you can appreciate, oftentimes towns and cities will rename parks, bridges, buildings, you name it, park benches. And there can be a desire to, for a lot of reasons, have a process for that, where the ideas come from, who approves them. It's not the most controversial thing in the world, compared to some other issues, but it is a worthwhile policy. So when somebody knocks on the door, it's not just, sure, let's vote on it tomorrow and call it a day. It can be quite simple. It could just be, a one-page policy that simply lays out how it works. But we thought that might be something you'd want to send to the committee formally. The other one we just talked about a few days ago, the placement of religious objects on public property, a little more of a constitutional question maybe. But it's something that if this comes up again, we have some sort of process. The LCT's done some good work explaining the constitutional law in that area. But I think we've had a couple communications maybe on that topic from the public. So finding a policy that is lawful, obviously, but allows people to submit those requests if that's where what the town wants to do. So those would both be things that if you're okay with it, the committee would dive into. I would do the research ahead of time to kind of give the committee some facts and figures, and we'll see whether something can come back to this group. So that's a long-winded, quick summary. Topics.
And thoughts on presentation for policy change proposals? Do a white paper?
Yeah,
or
so-
I don't want to
Yeah.
eat a ton of time because you guys are already going to spend a lot of time. Is there a good flow way that could be presented to us that we could look at it and we could ask if we have questions, but if we don't, that we could maybe
I think it would be
approve it more expeditiously?
I think if a topic is cycled through the board and there's a decision to not recommend anything, we could pretty easily write up a quick little summary of why we're suggesting to not act. In the case where we are suggesting, I think the work product would come in the form of a memo, and if there's a draft of a policy that we would bring back to you. That way, when you're discussing it, you can see what a draft might look like, and then also how we got there. And we would probably just put that either in a memo or in the agenda notes, but something that explains how we got to that point and who we looked at to kind of inform ourselves. The good news with a lot of these things is almost nothing is unique to Middlebury in this regard. A lot of these policies are things that other places are already tackling. So, but that would probably be a written form coming back to you.
Question?
Yeah, question. Some of the things that you're dealing with or will have might be a little bit of the purview of other committees that are already standing committees.
Yeah.
Public health and safety.
Yeah.
So I personally think that you should coordinate with those committees.
Sure.
Also,
So we
some of the things.
we've already on some of these have asked for input. So for example, with the winter parking, we ended up having discussions with Bill from Public Works, because who would know better about sort of the practical and operational side of that issue? We don't want to do anything in a vacuum. And I think in the instances where, like you said, where it overlaps, it's better to get everyone's input and present one thing rather than coming at it, having it go to another committee and then another committee. So,
For example, you're working with the Energy Committee on the renewable vehicle
we
policy.
had a good discussion with Bill and representatives from that committee to make sure that whatever the abstract goals of the Energy Committee are, that they're realizing the reality of what Bill or is facing when they're going out to purchase vehicles, right? To avoid having a policy that can't get past the practical hurdles of the vehicle industry. So that's an example of putting those two together and then hopefully coming out with another product that is a little more useful. Yeah.
On the question of whether we should ask the committee to review these two things, I think the naming of public spaces is great because I think that has come up as something like we should have some systematic way of doing that. So I would be in favor of asking the committee to look into that a little further.
Came up just recently on when
Lazarus.
Victor passed.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
Victor,
And
Victor
and then we struggled with it on the Lazarus Park.
yeah. Because we felt like we should have some process that
Sure.
we go through,
And at
Because
least,
was there some other name that we weren't considering, but this was the one that was presented to us? So anyway, on the religious objects on property, public property, that kind of reminds me of the discussion we had about, was it art? So something that had to do with free speech that we decided to decline considering opening up that box.
As David said, there's legal decisions, interpretations that I think would be nice to have synthesized and brought to the board
Okay.
for a thorough consideration.
So it just sounded similar to
Yeah.
things we've decided to not open the door to in the past. So that was my only feedback on that one.
and that could very well be the outcome. I
Okay.
mean, that there's nothing wrong with not acting on it, if an
Yeah,
issue,
okay.
sometimes.
So in that case, for me, it's fine if we get some more information. Let's keep that committee busy.
It's an enthusiastic group. We had Andy will tell you.
It was great. I was in the unfortunate position of needing to be at work that day and had to try to chair the meeting as a Zoom attendee, which is awkward as can be when you can't easily scan faces and see what's going on. But yeah, it was much better conversation than I expected going in. I thought it was great.
So do we need to do something formal?
I think that's enough.
Yeah,
I think we'll take that. Get going on it.
Sounds like a vote of confidence, Dave.
Alrighty. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, who's got check warrants?
I have check warrants. They look awesome. Shout out to our finance department.
Rock and
Let's
roll.
pay our bills. I move to approve total expenditures in the amount of $599,032.12, consisting of $469,299.89 for accounts payable and $129,732.23 for payroll for the period of December 20th, 2023 through January 9th, 2024.
And fire chief does the same thing. Every time he sits in here.
I'll second that. Did someone else do it already?
No,
I'll
I think
second
that's
it.
you.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 We lost Lindsay at some point. Was there a comment?
Chat.
A chat?
Check the chat.
Smoke, tree fell on the house, they power lines.
She needed to leave
You should pay
early.
somebody to do that. You got somebody and
Thanks so much for
Thank you
coming.
for being here. We do,
Yes,
we
thank
do
you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
just like that, I'm.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
They just set you
We
up.
can give, someone can give.
Okay, select board member concerns.
No, none.
Love the new website.
Yeah.
Looks great.
I'll second that one.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
We got no Lindsay. I do have something. I'm gonna be super quick. I heard that there was some tax status problem about Turning Point going into the St. Mary's School. I had never heard that as part of this body, and I was wondering what that was. Remember when Turning Point came to convert
Yeah.
the St. Mary's School?
Yeah.
And
Oh,
and I was
There was-
talking to a parishioner who was telling me that there was some legal complication. I had just never heard that, and I was just looking for a little
they were,
clarification on what happened there.
I mean, that fell apart and they're renovating their building.
yeah, they came back, they were upset at something because they didn't feel it was their fault.
Yeah. Anyway, I didn't know what that was, and I was asked about it and could not answer, and now I'm asking.
Okay.
It sounds familiar. I don't remember.
Yeah, that's
the
fine.
Details.
Yeah,
but I'll
I
get back to
expected exactly that. I had the misfortune of spending time at Porter the other night. Not for myself, but I was absolutely amazed at the quality of care and everyone working there, including the ambulance folks coming in. And I see the police and fire and charter house around and observe them more regularly and know how awesome they are. And it was just an expansion of my view of all of the good, hardworking people that make this town so awesome, including homeless support while I was there, which was delivered to difficult people in the most compassionate way I could imagine. And thirdly, I see that there's a DEI meeting about welcome materials to the town, and I'm hoping that that comes to us in our next packet.
In the interest to get on to the executive session.
Yeah.
Who's ready?
I'm ready.
Go.
In accordance with Vermont's open meeting law requirements, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of contractual matters would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its strategy if it discusses the contracts in public. I like how I can just put any word I want in there.
Fill in the blank. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I further move that the board enter into executive session to discuss the contractual matters under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We go into executive session, 9:34.